What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 9 Monday Night Football. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. Okay guys, in this video, I'm going to give you my top DFS picks for this Monday Night Football showdown between the Baltimore Ravens and the New Orleans Saints. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 9. Let's take a look at this Monday Night Football showdown between the Baltimore Ravens and the New Orleans Saints. So at the quarterback position, I like Lamar Jackson from the Baltimore Ravens playing the New Orleans Saints, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been middle-of-the-pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson has averaged 24.3 fantasy points per game on the season, and I like this pick because he's getting an average of 9.4 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 74% owned, projected at 24 fantasy points here tonight, and he's $12,400 DraftKings salary. Lamar Jackson has scored 22, 11, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he got 9, 10, and 7 rush attempts in those games. So I love the rushing upside, so I like Lamar Jackson here versus the New Orleans Saints. Okay, now for the New Orleans Saints, you have Andy Dalton playing the Baltimore Ravens, who have the 9th worst defense overall. They give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Andy Dalton has averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 2.4 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 51% owned, projected at 18 fantasy points here tonight. He's $10,200 DraftKings salary, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 46.5 points scored in this game, with the Saints trailing by 1. So this is a good matchup. We got a close competitive game here, and Andy Dalton has scored 17, 33, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Andy Dalton here versus the Baltimore Ravens. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So stud on the slate and captain material is Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints, and the Baltimore Ravens have been middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Alvin Kamara has averaged 20.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 15.8 rush attempts per game and 7.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 66% owned, projected at 20.6 fantasy points here tonight. He's $11,400 DraftKings salary, and Alvin Kamara has scored 43, 18, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 18, 11, and 19 rush attempts on top of 10, 9, and 9 pass targets. So tons of volume. He's got the most upside on the slate. I love Alvin Kamara as a captain here tonight. So I like Alvin Kamara here versus the Baltimore Ravens. The other running back I consider is Kenyon Drake from the Baltimore Ravens playing the New Orleans Saints, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Kenyon Drake has averaged 8.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.2 rush attempts per game and 1.5 pass targets per game. So not a ton of volume here, but he has done really well the past 2 out of his 3 games, and he's going to be about 42% owned, projected at 9.5 fantasy points here tonight. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary. Kenyon Drake has scored 17, 1, and 23 fantasy points in the last 3 games, up of 7, 11, and 10 rush attempts on top of 4, 1, and 2 pass targets. So he's getting between 10 and 12 touches per game, but he does have some upside. He's an explosive player, so if he can break a tackle or get the ball in space, he can make it happen. So I like Kenyon Drake here versus the New Orleans Saints. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So I like Chris Olave from the New Orleans Saints and the Baltimore Ravens. They're giving up the third most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Chris Olave has averaged 15.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 47% owned, projected at 13.8 fantasy points here tonight. He's 8,600 DraftKings salary, and Chris Olave has scored 10 and 21 fantasy points in the last 2 games off of 7 and 14 pass targets. So a great matchup here. So I like Chris Olave here versus the Baltimore Ravens. I also like Devin Duvernay from the Baltimore Ravens playing the New Orleans Saints, who we know have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're giving up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Devin Duvernay has averaged 11.4 fantasy points per game on the season, only getting an average of 4 pass targets per game, but he's been on the field for 63% of the snaps, gonna be about 33% owned, projected at 10.3 fantasy points here tonight. He's 6,800 DraftKings salary, and Devin Duvernay has scored 16, 6, and 2 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 4, 3, and 5 pass targets. He got 2 rush attempts last game and actually does average 1 rush attempt per game on the season as well. But I like this pick because Mark Andrews is out, so Devin Duvernay could get some extra pass targets in this game. It's a good matchup, so I like Devin Duvernay here versus the New Orleans Saints. Now, if you're looking to save some salary at this position, I've got a couple of sleeper picks here for you. For the New Orleans Saints, take a look at Marquez Callaway. Now, he's only averaging 3.9 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 3 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 9% owned, and he's projected at 4.4 fantasy points here tonight, but he's only 4,600 DraftKings salary. Marquez Callaway has scored 2, 4, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 1, 6, and 7 pass targets. So only 1 pass target last week, but 6 and 7 pass targets the week before that. So he could get a handful of pass targets here tonight. It's a good matchup. So I like Marquez Callaway here versus the Baltimore Ravens. And the other low salary option that I like at wide receiver is Tre'Quan Smith from the New Orleans Saints. We know the Baltimore Ravens are giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and Tre'Quan Smith has averaged 7.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 12% owned, projected at 6.5 fantasy points here tonight. He's only 3,400 DraftKings salary. Tre'Quan Smith scored 0, 11, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 1, 6, and 3 pass targets. So it's a good matchup, low salary. You're going to need to play some of these low salary players so you can fit in those studs like Alvin Kamara Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. So I like Tre'Quan Smith here versus the Baltimore Ravens. So we got a couple of questionable wide receivers here tonight. For the New Orleans Saints, Jarvis Landry is questionable. If he does play, he's averaging 9.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.3 pass targets per game. He's $5,200 DraftKings salary. He's got a good matchup. Well, all the wide receivers have a good matchup here tonight. Both the Ravens and the Saints have struggled to defend the wide receiver position. So if Jarvis Landry plays tonight, you could consider him for the New Orleans Saints. And then for the Baltimore Ravens, Demarcus Robinson is questionable. So if he plays, you could take a look at him. He got 8 pass targets last week, scored 12 fantasy points. He's going to be about 19% owned, projected at 7.7 fantasy points here tonight. And he's $5,600 DraftKings salary. So if Demarcus Robinson is a go, I think he's an interesting play here. So I like Demarcus Robinson if he plays here tonight versus the New Orleans Saints. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. So listed as a tight end, but this guy, he gets the rush attempts. Take a look at Taysom Hill from the New Orleans Saints. And Taysom Hill has averaged 12.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.6 rush attempts per game. And he gets about almost 1 pass target per game, mostly in there for his rushing ability. And I like this pick because they put him in for goal line packages. If they're in the red zone, you can look for Taysom Hill to get in there and possibly rush the ball into the end zone. He's going to be about 14% owned, projected at 10 fantasy points here tonight. He's $6,400 DraftKings salary, and Taysom Hill has scored 8, 10, and 5 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 10, 3, and 5 rush attempts in those games, on top of 2 and 1 pass target. So 12 touches last week makes him an interesting play. So I like Taysom Hill here versus the Baltimore Ravens. But my favorite play of the slate is Isaiah Likely from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the New Orleans Saints have been pretty good defending opposing tight ends, but remember, Mark Andrews is out. So last time that Isaiah Likely played last week, without Mark Andrews, he scored 20 fantasy points off of 7 pass targets. He's going to be about 44% owned, projected at 9.9 fantasy points here tonight. He's $5,800 DraftKings salary. So I like Isaiah Likely here versus the New Orleans Saints. The other tight end that I like is Juwan Johnson from the New Orleans Saints. The Baltimore Ravens, we know, have the 9th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Juwan Johnson has averaged 6.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.3 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 68% of the snaps, going to be about 17% owned, projected at 6.3 fantasy points here tonight. He's $4,400 DraftKings salary, and Juwan Johnson has scored 3, 20, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 4, 5, and 6 pass targets. So for the salary, I think this does make him a pretty awesome play as well. So I like Juwan Johnson here versus the Baltimore Ravens.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com.
You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.